Hello there, Sherman here again, coming to you from Tempo Trend Studios, as always, Victoria, BC, Canada. It's a sunny day today. I'm feeling in a mood to share some more information with you. I'm really happy about doing this. I hope you're enjoying it. I hope you can grab what you need from it. I know some of you guys are already in that zone where you're thinking, oh, come on, let's pick up the pace. And some other people are saying, slow down, explain it better. So I hope I'm finding that happy medium that pleases most of you. You're never going to please everybody, obviously. We've talked about a number of things. Just to recap quickly, we've covered the columns, as I call them, and we've focused on the key of G, and we can transpose this out. We'll get into A and all the keys that people really love. But the columns overlapping the major minor in each position, 5 of these. The last lesson covered the final one at the 12th position. So we've got a good degree, and of course it repeats again after that. So if the neck was 30 feet long, as I would say, it would be the same thing. So we've covered that. We've covered the mixolydian in every area, and I hope I've done that thoroughly enough. Also, some of the ARPs we talked about a little bit. We're going to get into that a little bit more. Last time I focused on, but I gave you an introduction to the double stops that come out of those chords, and that'll be one of the things I want to integrate tonight, because I tend to play a fair amount of double stops in my playing. Early on, I think it was an attempt to fatten up some of my solos in a way, perhaps to compensate for the fact that I didn't have a lot of speed, at least the speed that I have now. So to make up for that, compensate in some way, I try to make my solos a little fatter and maybe more interesting, I hope, you know. So sometimes you harmonize a note and it can sound like two players at once. If you get enough of that going, you can kind of keep the whole thing going. I could play double stops across the whole thing, and maybe I will do that. It's a good idea. I just thought of that. I'll play as many double stops as I can. I'll call this the double stop blues, and I'll just play it in the key of A just for something fun, different, and then I'll bring everything back to our home base for the time being, which is the key of G, and then I'll bring some of these. So I'm going to play as many double stops as I can play in this, of all kinds. We have, last time I presented a little bit about thirds, sixths, and tenths. But there's also fourths. You can throw some fifths in there occasionally. And if I'm leaving anybody out, well, I guess that's it. There are obviously other ones. You could do minor second. I guess you can use that for... I don't think you get much call for it in a solo, but it might sound pretty good, maybe. We don't need it. So let's focus on playing far in, not far out, okay, for the time being. So here's the key of A, and I'm going to throw as many double stops in as I can. See what happens. that's a lot of stuff, just throwing them in every which way but loose. Far too cluttered, far too same, but a lot of good stuff, I think, in there that you could scavenge through there and say, oh, I'd like that, I don't care about that, I like that. So that's sort of what double stops are like. You can add them to enhance or to magnify the intensity. They can also add some aggression if you spank them a little bit. You know, everybody's... Now when Chuck Berry's doing that, for example, staying with A for a second, he's going to the fourth. That's a third right there. Thirds are major and minor. We'll talk more about the theory of that later. So they're either in that row on that string or this row, so a diagonal or straight up and down. And thirds on these set of strings, different because of the way the guitar's tuned, are on this angle. So you've got fourth, third, or if you hammer it, same thing, third. Then when the chord changes, that's over an A chord. If you think of it as a D or even a D ninth, if you know that chord, you'll notice that's in a straight row there. So you got, and you can't go to that in that D because that's the note. So you have to go. So I hope you can hear that difference. Now if I could play a bass with my thumb, you can hear it. Nice and pretty. Then you go to D. Can you hear that? I hope you can. So I'll just noodle around that. So you can hear that it has to change. Then when you go to the E chord, you got a whole different kettle of fish. Now you can take anything that you do for the 4 chord, in this case D, and move it up 2 frets. So that's a good thing about the guitar. A great thing, excuse me, is that everything's transposable, moving laterally across the neck. And I would advise you to put these things in every key that you can imagine, because it's going to help you in your moment of panic to have access to something. And sometimes just having a double stop as a home base, as a destination point, as it were, is going to help you a whole bunch. So that's a whole bunch of those that I splattered in there. And I didn't use any tritones this time, but I could have. Now let's get back to that for just a second. Last time I touched on that for G, and we're going back to G, as promised, our home base. So now you've got all your scales across the neck. I hope you're merrily getting those things together. And you can put some tritones in just as a little punctuation. So think of it as somebody playing guitar behind you. So all you guys that think of having a trio, and I think a trio is a good idea, because sometimes 3 is a magic number. 4 can be too much, unless you get a good keyboard player, but then, you know, sometimes maybe they're playing too much, or too much clutter. So you thin it out and you hear someone like Stevie Ray or those guys, the Cream, classic Cream with Clapton. You hear that and you think, my gosh, I'd be great to be able to have a good sound. ZZ Top, all these bands that come to mind, they all have their own way of doing it. And then on the albums they might overdub a little bit and sneak a rhythm track in there, and you think, wait a minute, that's not a trio anymore. Well, that's just the way it goes, you know, with technology you can sneak things in. But in a live situation, you want to play as full as you can. So you can use the tritones to fill out those little gaps and provide a little breath. So you're not just playing notey, 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 notey. So if I just played, I'll speed it up here much faster than I'd want to play it for you. But I'm just going to play G, and I'm going to play just what I generally would hear guys doing, just a whole bunch of clutter. Just a whole bunch of spaghetti. Steve Miller used to say, serving up a whole bunch of spaghetti. Not bad spaghetti, but spaghetti. So now what if I played a little less intensely, leave some breaths, and put a Now, the trick is, can you remember where you are? Remember I told you in the beginning, Joe Pass, apparently from the anecdotes I heard, would grab somebody's hand in the middle of a jam session, one of the lessons, and say, what chord are we on? And you'd hope you know what chord you're on. I would hope you'd know what chord you're on. It's one distraction at the start though to think, oh, we're on C, oh, I gotta move back, oh, it's G. For a while that bugs you, but let's take it slow. We'll play it back to the regular speed, and I'm gonna thin it out and put some tritones in for you, okay? Up the neck. Put some on the beat. Okay, so you get the idea. You can fool around, it's hit and miss, but if you can find one and you're playing, you can kind of hear that. It's like having a second guitar player just going, okay. Think of somebody going, yeah, man, cheering you on, right? So, I'm gonna play this little phrase, right? And sometimes if you can grab it a certain way and you, but that starts sounding jazzy. Maybe you don't want to go quite that route. You might want to keep it sort of where Duke Robillard and those guys are just a little punctuation. And I've heard Duke Robillard, all these names that should come to mind here, but you'll have Ronnie Earl. Those guys will throw in even some of the guys like Kenny Burrell. Check those out, those Blue Note albums, 1950s, late 50s, early 60s. Chitlins, Con Carney, and all the funky names. But they were just sort of like a... You learn how to phrase, how to just let things breathe. Horn players have to take a breath. We don't. So we tend to just keep spewing out all this stuff. Better to make it breathe. So tritones will help you with that. And so now let's go into the double stop arena again. And before I do that, I just want to show this thing, which it's got a lot of stuff in this, and you're never going to see it from that distance, and I hope you can see some of it. It's called the Amazing Caged Chord System. And I'm referencing a lot of chords from time to time that are not the what we call the root 6, that's your G7 one with the root on the 6th string, and the root 5, which is your C7, if you use that shape, on the 5th fret there, and D7. So those are the big three for our G blues, if you want to just use straight 7s. But there are other shapes here, and if you're not familiar with this, it's a mind-blowing thing. And I was looking on the interweb the other day, one of my students calls it, and I noticed that somebody's saying, they're already selling something. They're selling this magical guitar system. You don't have to learn any of this stuff to play like the pros. And I'm thinking, man, if I'd only seen that when I was 19. Well, I haven't seen them show me anything yet. I'm sorry to have to say that. Not mentioning anybody in particular, not putting anybody down, but I'm not seeing it. So I must be from Missouri. Isn't that the show me state? You know, show me. If they show me, I'll get back to you and I'll tell you I found it. But for now, the people who say you don't need the caged chord system, you don't need pentatonics, I don't know what planet they're on, but they should Google reality maybe or something, because every time I'm playing I'm referencing these things, and it does help, because anything that you can reference, and I've said this before, in the heat of the moment, major pentatonic, minor pentatonic, mixolydian, any other modes, double stops, it's going to save your life, because it gives you one more option to play. And that's the fun of playing, is to have some muscle memory and some safe refuge to find in your moment of terror. When you run out of ideas, you go, thank you, there's something there. That's what you got here. So the cage system is simply this. If you're not familiar with it, if you are, I'll restate it, and I've given you the 3 camps: major chords, and check my own work here, 7th chords and minors. I've given you the best all-purpose shapes that you can use. Some of them are bars, some of them are not bars. It's just the way it works, the math of the neck. So looking at this top row here, major chords, if you take a C chord, and if you're making it a bar, I'll put this down. It'll be posted at the end of the lesson, so you can study it. I hope you can see it. Maybe we can do a magnetized version of it. Here's a C chord everybody knows. I must have bent the heck out of those strings. Here's C. No bar chord, right? But if I did it like this, pretending you didn't have your first finger operational, you'd be barring it at the 0 fret. That gives you a chance to move that up the neck, doesn't it? There's a D flat, or C sharp D flat. Move it up the neck. Here's a nice D chord. These are good to know. You move them across the neck. Here's your E flat, D sharp E flat, E. How many times when I'm playing an E, if everybody else is going, I'll go up here. Boy, you can play some really nice stuff out of that. That's at the 4th fret, looking like a C chord with a little baby bar over this. Don't bar the whole thing if you don't need to. That's hard on your hands. Don't bar anything you don't need. Be malleable. Chords are malleable things. They're not set in stone. You want to kind of keep your hand loose, both for economy and moving, but also for carpal tunnel. There's no awards given out for having a problem. I've had little problems with my hands over the years, never anything to do with that kind of thing. And I've had people approach me when I was on the road and say, I wish I'd met you years ago, because when I talked to them about economizing the grip and everything and getting your hand in a better posture. Notice how I hold the guitar. A lot of people think that's pretentious or something, but it's to get my hand right where I want it to be with the most ease. And whether I'm standing, it's the same whether I stand or lay down. So you got to experiment, but the guitar slinger thing is really hard when you're trying to do some of these chords. And that whiplash effect, from what I understood going to hand clinics, is where you're really in danger. So more on that later. We'll talk more about that kind of thing. But I want you to have a long career. Any of you folks, I'd like you to avoid that stuff. So anyhow, so you're back to the C chord here. You're at E. That's a great one. F, F sharp, G. So go across the neck. So there's all your C chords, but coming from that C bar chord. Now here's where it gets interesting. The next chord you present is A. Now, if you don't do it the way I do it, if you're one of those guys that when you bar chords you do this kind of thing, you're getting either a dead note or you're getting a Hawaiian chord. But I would prefer you do it like this if you can. 3 fingers, because it looks just like the A. So 2. Now look at that. There's an A. Here's an A sharp or B flat. Here's a B. Here's a C. And a little bit of theory for you. You notice there's no sharp or flat between the B and C, E and F. You notice on the piano sometimes there's 2 white keys adjacent. Now you know a little bit about piano if you didn't know it already. So, okay, no sharp. The black keys are your enharmonics, your sharp and flats. Okay, so here's B, here's your C. Now I'm going to stop right there. Remember we said C was here? That's the next C on the neck right there. So work between them. If you know that already, you probably know it like this, right? Okay? But I'd like you to do it like that, at least for now, so you can get all the notes. Experiment with that. There's no right or wrong way, but you know, certain songs that you need that note. That kind of. Try doing that with this, and you'll see what I mean. They ain't gonna work. Okay, so C sharp, D flat, so forth. Okay, so now you've got 2 C chords. Starting to spell the word caged. C, a C shape, and now an A shape. Ah, this is interesting. Now, you take a G chord, the way most people play it. I know there's some of you guys be doing like this. Some people are doing like this, heaven forbid. Look at my wrenched neck there. The wrenched wrist on the back of the neck. So, now you've got G like this. Move that up 1 fret. Can you lay a bar down there? At least for a minute, just to test it. Not a full bar, but just MC bar, we call it, middle bar. There's a that was A, G sharp, A flat. Here's A. Go all the way up. Gets easier. Bear with me, don't squeeze every time. Ah, 5th fret. The root is on C. Hope you know the names of some of these notes. Here's a C. Now, we can use this to great advantage. I don't sit and strum this chord all day. If I was going to do that, I'd get a capo and just clamp it off. But practice knowing that. Now, we just crossed the G. Crossed into G territory with our G chord. C, A, G. Starting to spell the word caged. You getting it? Here's C. The next C on the neck looks like an A. The next C on the neck looks like a G. Remember where these guys are? I think you know this chord already. Here's a C chord at the 8th fret. Okay? That E, we've just spelled the word cage. We spelled the word cage. So here's an interesting thing. Isn't that fascinating? Now, if we move the D chord shape, pretending we don't have a first finger, because we need it for barring, or it's disabled. That's morbid. Don't have a first finger. Hope you have a first finger. So move it up the line. You get up to E. Here's a nice E chord that I use sometimes. Don't want to play that when somebody else is playing it. Go up here. A little bit tricky, a little bit of a stretch there. Go all the way up the line, until you get to the 10th fret with that note, and that's a C note on the 4th string. So you've got this. That's a D shape at the 10th fret with a little space there. Make sure you get that. Here's all your C chords, and I'm spelling the word caged. You're home. Notice I laid a little bar chord there. You can do that. It won't hurt, but you don't have to. Isn't that something? So every time a chord appears, it takes off that to the next shape spelling the word caged. It's trying to spell the word caged. So you'll always know where the next chord is if you can memorize this and get this system down. I think it's essential, and it's a happy accident, a serendipitous thing that it spells the word caged because it's easy to remember. So here we go. Here's all the C's. C, A shape, G shape, E shape, that's a bar E. Don't think of it that way sometimes. And a D. Now what if we were doing G? Will the system work? You betcha it will. Here's G. Well, G is the 3rd letter in the word caged. So what comes after that? I'm sorry, it's the E. When I say G, I'm holding a G chord. Here's G. Here's G. It's just an E shape. So after E comes the D shape. There it is. So get those distances down. Then we start with C again, because we're spelling the word caged. It wants to spell that word. And then it goes to A, because you're trying to spell the word caged. So there's another G chord at the 10th fret. And here's the G that we know so well. So now you know all the G's. And you can use those basic chords to go into your jazz chords, your blues chords, everything. And down below I've given you the minors and the sevens, so that'll keep you busy. Fill in some of those. I'm sure you know some of them. What am I asking you to do? I'm asking you to learn the whole neck. Ultimately, yes, I am. But over time, for now, start with the first few keys that you most need. So what we need right now is the key of G's. So learn all your G's, learn all your C's, and all your D's. So how about that for a week's work? Why don't you try that, learning your G's? So, and you can make them all sevens or make them majors if you want. Don't make them minors because we're not dealing with minor blues just yet. But you can get away with G, and here's a C, and you can make the D a seventh. So that's one column right there. How about that? Then you go up here, you're not going to go up, here's a G with a D shape. You want to make it a seventh? Okay? And then, depending on which one I showed there, you'll have a C7. Or you can just do a regular C if you want to, like this. I think I show it like this. Just kill the first string. And when you're playing these chords, you're not going to be sitting there strumming them going like this. You're going to be... Remember how Jimmy played those things? He'd be using this bar C shape. Am I playing cowboy chords and strumming them? No, but I can see the underlying chords. I see these shapes, and I see this, so the bar G shape, but not like that. I see it like this. So you'll come up with some really nice styles of accompaniment, and also you'll see where your arps are and that tie in with your scales. Boy, there's a lot of stuff here. It's a very holistic way of looking at everything. But you need all the information on file somewhere, and stirring that pot of information in the moment you're playing, it's going to create some wonderful things. So just to sign off this time, I'm just going to do a little G blues, and I'll put in some of the caged shapes across the neck. Again, one more thing to deal with, okay? Here we go. Just a nice little G thing. Why did that sound so country all of a sudden? Well, it does kind of. And I always thought when Jimmy played a lot of those, that kind of stuff. And you also have, you've heard that, you know, free ride, right? So you get that. So a lot of chording, we've moved away from the big, you need a 6-note chord on every chord. We need to sketch a chord, because you have to imagine there's going to be a bass player in there somewhere, or some other factors, maybe a piano player. So you just play the essential tones. Boy, does that free your hand up to not risk carpal tunnel and to do some crazy little things around the chords. So it's those satellite notes around the chords that create the stuff that's so catchy that we've all loved over the years. Very few things that we've ever heard on chording where it was just somebody smashing. Some exceptions. I can probably think of some, you know. Pete Townsend would have a word with me on that, you know, doing some chords and windmills. But anyway, what we're dealing with now is trying to map out, lay the grid to map out the neck, and one surefire way of seeing where the zones are is to see those chords. It's a lot of work. Start with the key of G, get all your G's across the neck, get all your C's, and get all your D7s. Or if you'd want to, just D's. But D7 would be nice, because that'll tie in with your mixolydian, and you'll hear it, okay? So this is me signing off again. I hope you enjoyed this segment. A lot of info. Do your best. See you next time.